Tara Aguilar, co-founder of Live Energy, and I'm bringing you the Curveball Architecture podcast. Today, we're speaking to Richard Blake, breathwork specialist. Richard, thank you so much for having the time today. It's great to have you on. We're going to be talking a lot about how you can use breath to improve your mindset, alter your mood, and also improve your immunity. And we're going to be looking at the effects of EMF, 5G, and the detrimental effects of electricity on our health. So, to start with, Richard, tell me a little bit about what you do with breath work and what it can do for you.
So I am, a breath worker. I call myself the breath geek because I like to geek out on breath. I like to be a biohacker as well as a breath worker. So I try to use scientific evidence to support my claims. There's a lot of really exciting stuff that comes from the breath work I do is more spiritual and more woo-woo, but thankfully, science is catching up to these things and it's starting to be able to come up with hypotheses of how these things work. And I also biohack my breath work. I use grounding mats, I use EMF protection, I use blue light blocking glasses and things like that as well to help my clients. I have a Juve red light up on my wall as well, and use essential oils at the same time, so to give people a full holistic experience, healing mind, body and spirit as much as we can in one session.
Yeah, I love that. And you're really combining the latest of science and technology. So you've got those measurable, trackable results with the aromatherapy, the holistic side, the spirituality, amalgamating them together to get the best results. But how can we use our breath to be healthier?
Yeah, well, breath is life in many senses. We can live without food for a few hours, but we can't live without breath for very long. The breath work I do is very much about healing, and it's about trauma release. It comes from the Western tradition of the Esalen Institute in California. It's not so much to do with pranayama. So, as I mentioned earlier, the way this was developed by Stanislav Grof was he was doing psychiatric research on LSD for healing trauma, addiction, and depression. Then that was made legal in the 60s, and he discovered this breathwork technique that he called holotropic breathwork. And my school of breathwork, which is clarity breathwork, transformational breathwork, comes from him. And the idea is that you go into this non-ordinary state of consciousness that allows you to sort of bypass that overthinking mind, the default mode network, and go into the body. And there's a great book by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's basically suggesting how trauma is not stored in the mind. Actually, it's more stored in the nervous system. And this is why people will say, psychiatrists will say, my clients can give you dissertations in their problems. They understand their problems, but their problems don't change. And it's only with breath work and also with psychedelics these days, people are able to really change their lives, get rid of depression, get rid of PTSD, get rid of addiction through this breathwork technique.
And is that because a lot of the problems kind of live in the body rather than the mind?
Yes, I think the mind is it's a big part of the whole thing, but it's not everything. And traditional psychotherapy is very focused on the mind. I mean, I have a postgraduate certificate in psychotherapy, studied at university, and I was the whole time just writing essays, basically going like, the body, the body, the body. Why are we not talking about the body? And there are schools of psychotherapy that focus on it, with like Peter Levine and somatic experiencing, but there's just not enough emphasis on the body in university taught psychotherapy, or at least the course that I studied. And yeah, I think the nervous system is such a key part of it. Basically, trauma, whether it's capital T trauma or little t trauma, whether it's PTSD from a war zone or from little t traumas that may be a rejection as a child or something like that, that gets stored in the nervous system. And the way that works is, or at least the hypothesis is basically what we have is our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Parasympathetic is our rest and digest. Sympathetic is the fight or flight. When something happens to trigger you, say it's running away from a tiger or it's being told off by an authority figure, we activate that sympathetic nervous system to go into fight or flight. And ideally, we then go back into parasympathetic nervous system. But what happens with trauma is we get stuck. We get stuck up there in that overactive state, and then we can't relax, we can't rest, we can't digest. And it's a little bit like, there's a good analogy of you have your web browser, and every time you open a new tab on that web browser, it's stuck there. So every time you go into the sympathetic state and have one of these little micro traumas, you open up a web browser. And what my breath work, not my breath work, the breath technique that I use does is it activates the sympathetic nervous system, allows you to really gently re-experience or reprocess that little trauma, and then close that tab on the browser and then go back into the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, because the problem we have right now, and it does feel everyone's swept up with the virus and worries about it, is that everyone is swept into the sympathetic. I mean, with the news, with all the fear, and we're stuck up there. And it's almost like that is more dangerous potentially than the virus itself, because of the way people are swept up in the news and the anxiety and the stress. And how do we, from a perspective of looking at the current situation, how do we move out of that? How do we detach ourselves from some of the craziness? The world is just in sympathetic right now. How do we step back and recenter and get back into the parasympathetic? That's a big question. There's a little thing you can do.
What can you do to get into parasympathetic? I think the best form of meditation is the one you'll do. And breath work for me is the best form of meditation because it's the one I'll do. And a lot of people have called this breath work meditation on steroids, or breath or meditation for people who can't meditate, because a lot of meditation is very passive and we have very active minds. Whereas breath work, there's a bit more doing. So first you're following a routine, you're following a technique, and that allows your mind to go like, okay, I've got something to focus on. We'll keep the mind occupied with the breath technique whilst the rest of the body is able to relax and get into that parasympathetic nervous system. But I mean, a lot of people say, oh, I can't meditate, so they just give up on it, or they say, oh, exercise is my meditation, or looking at, in nature is my meditation. That's great, that's nice to get into the relaxation, but I really feel like you have to do something with your eyes closed. I feel like when we have our eyes open, there's way too much stimulus. And basically, if you're a spiritual person, you can't receive any spiritual guidance or inner guidance, if you think of it as just your inner self, when your eyes are open. So I really think you've got to have your eyes closed for 10 minutes a day, basically.
All right, great. So I think that now would be a really good time perhaps to demo something, so that for those of you who think that you can't meditate or it's too difficult, if Richard, you could lead us on a 2 to 5 minute, what do you call Soma meditation? Is that right?
This won't be Soma breath work, but
Yeah.
Soma is a really good one to check out.
For the listeners out there, just make sure you're not driving right now and you're sitting down in a safe place. Take it away, Richard.
Okay. So making yourself comfortable. You can be seated or lying down, and closing the eyes. And we're going to start with something called the 4-7-8 breath. And we're going to do 4 rounds of that. And so it's going to be 4 seconds in through the nose, holding for 7 seconds, and then 8 exhaling for 8 seconds through the mouth. So here we go. So inhale through the nose. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale through the mouth. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale through the nose. 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale through the mouth. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and now, keeping your eyes closed, you can return to your regular nasal breathing pattern. And we're just going to do a little visualization. And we're going to try and elevate our mood. We're going to create some heart coherence. So we're going to focus on our hearts, bringing our attention to the area of our heart, and we're going to create a feeling of gratitude. So I want you to think about something or someone that you just feel love for. Someone that brings a smile to your face, a pet, a child, a grandparent, a parent, someone who you just feel unconditional love for and just brings great happiness. And as you're feeling that gratitude, feel it in your heart. Feel the love in your chest. Breathe into your chest and exaggerate that feeling of gratitude and love. And know that whilst we're doing this gratitude, you're creating heart coherence, which is lowering cortisol and allowing testosterone in the men to raise and hormones to balance out. You're trying to enter into that parasympathetic state. And you can see how you can control your emotions, you can control your life as you focus on that person or thing or pet that you feel love for. And then very slowly you can start to bring your awareness back into the room you're in. Awareness of the sounds. Awareness of your body. Feeling the feet on the floor or the chair. And then very slowly you can open your eyes.
Wow, I feel so zen and relaxed right now. That was good. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so that was just a brief bit of breath work there, and then just a little bit of science from the Heart Math Institute there with their little gratitude meditation as well.
And when would you do this sort of meditation and bit of breath work? Would you do it in the evenings or morning or?
Again, the best time is the one you'll do. I do lots of little ones throughout the day. Yeah. So I have the Muse headband, which I use in the morning. Mm-hmm. And then if I'm over on the tube, which obviously is not right now, I'll put on like Oak, which is a free app, or Headspace or Calm, just to do 10 minutes then. Before food, I always do a little routine of 4, 7, 8, then a body scan, and then just a little grounding visualization to go into that rest and digest mode, so that I'm not, spiking cortisol and shuttling all the food into my fat cells. And so, yeah, breath work can be used for fat loss as well. Something I'm very.
Okay, it was slowing down your eating as well, right? Making more mindful when you're eating at the same time. Yeah. That's true, because often you'll eat when you're really hungry or anxious. I know I do that a lot of the time, but just take a few deep breaths, slow down, and then you'll notice when you're actually full up and you're less likely to overeat and taste the food. and enjoy it. Definitely. So I love that. I love that breathing exercise. I'm going to, what I'll probably do is edit that out as its own snapshot too. And push out like on Instagram, which so that people can literally just take part with links to you, obviously.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope listeners that you tried that, or that you'll be listening to it later on. What I want to talk a little bit about now is the EMF debate. So going into that, there's a lot of hearsay about EMF and Wi-Fi, radio waves and Bluetooth being detrimental to our health. But is there any kind of evidence to prove that? And I know that there's been a lot of people were burning down the 5G towers en masse because they think it's linked to coronavirus. Is there evidence to show that EMF, Wi-Fi, 5G does damage our immune system and therefore make us more susceptible to diseases? Or is it actually directly linked to coronavirus, as some people think? Is there any substance to those claims, do you think? And what do you think about?
Well, we have to be very careful because Ofcom have banned anyone talking about the 5G conspiracy. And actually, David Icke did a big video on London Real yesterday and talked about the conspiracy, and it's already been taken down. It had many thousands of people watching, and it's been banned already. So we cannot talk about the 5G conspiracy. What I will say about 5G is there is no proof that it is bad because they have not done the tests. And that is the frightening thing. They don't know it's safe, but they also don't know it's dangerous. A meter costs somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 to test 5G. And I was just listening to Brian Hoyer on Joe McCullough's podcast, and he was saying that no one really knows. That's the problem with 5G. It's not that it's definitely harmful, although a lot of people think it is. It's that no one has done the tests. So that's worrying. On another point, a lot of people are worried about EMFs, and a lot of tests that have been done on Wi-Fi, 4G and things like that, they're done in isolation. So it's like, oh, if I put this Wi-Fi router near someone, does it damage them? And it's like, oh yeah, there's voltage in the body. They've done tests, they can test if you put a Bluetooth headphone in someone's head, there's voltage here, there's voltage down in their bodies, but maybe a little bit of Bluetooth people can tolerate that. The problem that I think is people have a Bluetooth headset, then a phone in their pocket which has 4G, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth at the same time. Then they have their Wi-Fi router, then they have their smart meter, then they have their smart TV, then they have their laptop, then they have their smart watch, and it's just so much. It's just the sheer volume of radio frequencies and EMFs and dirty electricity and all these things that just add up to being worrying. It worries me. But what reassures me is how easy it is to avoid these things. And it's just, the inverse square law. If you move that thing 2 meters away from you, the amount of radiation goes down by many, many, many fold. So that is the simplest thing to do, is just keep the stuff away from you. If you want to use it, use it a meter away from you. If you want to listen to your phone, put it down on the surface and type like this, or get shielding and things like that.
Yeah, and I think one of the tests you can do that's quite simple would be to, if you're used to sleeping like like some people will do this, like with the phone beside their head at nighttime and then all these things plugged in, just clear the bedroom of electricity and put your phone on Bluetooth, off Bluetooth and on airplane mode, and then see if you sleep better. And then you immediately know if it's having a negative impact on you or not. And obviously there'll be loads of other signals that you don't have control over within your 3 meter vicinity or however big your bedroom is, but then you can go to the next level in which you start shielding, because you have one of those pods, is that right, to protect your bed? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so I had do you know Sarah Hodgson? She's in
I know of her. Yeah.
So she came around and measured my house, And I live in Hammersmith, near the Hammersmith and City Line railway station or railway line. And she said, this is the highest I've ever seen radio frequencies from external sources. And you're going to want to do something about that. So she recommended an EMF canopy, which is kind of like a mosquito net made from block silver. Is it kind of a metal that reflects a lot of those things. And then she just educated me on safe use of technology. She's not saying don't use technology, she's just saying there's a better way to use it than a lot of us realize. So I've got my Wi-Fi on a timer, so it turns itself off at 9:30 at night and then comes back on automatically in the morning.
And then you're automating that shielding, aren't you? So you don't have to think about it all the time. It becomes part of the routine.
Yeah, it was like a $10 thing or £10 thing on Amazon that just set up, and that's fine. And then also, yeah, just having my phone on airplane mode if it's on my body, and especially sleep. I mean, that seems to be the key. Brian Hoyer, Joe McCullough, Sarah, they're all saying is make sure your sleep environment is free from a lot of these things, because that's when we're going into repair. And if your body can't repair properly, then it can't take on more stress the next day. So yeah, sleep is key.
So the one thing, if you can just make one change, it would be get electricity and Wi-Fi out of the bedroom. Even if you're exposed to it all day, just at nighttime when you sleep, limit it then.
Just turn your phone on airplane mode, make sure iPads, computers are out of the room, and just, yeah, keep it away from you when you're not using it.
What is the biggest curveball or obstacle that you've experienced that has the biggest impact on who you've become today?
For me, the biggest curveball was realizing that success does not make me happy. When I was a younger person, I wanted to be a fitness model, and I was really into the gym, and was so desperate to be in men's health. And I thought, once I'm in men's health, then I'll be happy. I'll get all the girls, everyone will respect me, no one will question me. And then, of course, I got into men's health. I had a feature, and I felt great for a few weeks. And then, of course, I was still depressed. And I was actually listening to Johan Hari yesterday, talking about Russian philosophy versus Western philosophy. And in the UK and in the US, we think that happiness is the most important thing for life. That's what our philosophy should be about. Whereas in Russia, they laugh at that because they believe that meaning should be the pursuit of life, and happiness is something that just comes and goes. And apparently there's a big correlation between depression, anxiety, all sorts of mental health disorders, with how much you believe that success and achievement are the most important thing in life. And I was very depressed as a younger person, because I thought success is going to make me happy. So I guess the biggest curveball was, I thought my life was about achieving things. I thought my life was about being a fitness model. And then afterwards, I actually developed an eating disorder after my men's health feature. Yeah. So being a fitness model with an eating disorder, binge eating disorder, was a real tricky one.
So how did you shift from that into the realization that that was not a good place to be? Because a lot of people have eating disorders, anxiety and issues, but they're stuck there. And they stay stuck for a very long time. So how did you get out of that?
So I started seeing a psychotherapist, and then I was a very materialistic person. I had no belief in God. I was just very scientific. I started to inquire into the realms of the unknown. I got into breath work, and I got into some ayahuasca ceremonies as well. And it wasn't until I discovered breathwork and ayahuasca that I had actually really kicked the addiction. I'd gotten over the depression and anxiety, but the eating disorder took me maybe 10 years to be free from. And so for me, it's breathwork. That's why I'm here talking about it right now.
Yeah, so that's had the biggest impact on you recovering and kind of clearing that trauma through the body, not just the mind, right? Because we can realize what issues we have in our heads, and yet we keep manifesting them through the body over and over again, to the point where it's so habitual. It's just our cells doing it without any conscious thought at
Yeah.
all.
And I think addictions, all addictions, if you believe in Gabor Mate's, his work, I'm a big fan of him, and he basically says the action of the heroin addict is the same as the work addict. They are trying to move from pain, away from pain. They're just using a different modality to do it. And addiction is really just a tool. It's a tool for coping, and unfortunately it's a maladaptive tool, and yeah, it becomes out of control. And I think everyone is somewhere on the spectrum of addiction. We are all a little bit compulsive, whether it's buying too many supplements on your website that I do occasionally, to heroin addicts or alcoholics and things like that. They all want the same thing: freedom from their pain.
Yeah, and I think as an extension of that to the everyday person, even if it's because you can have good addictions as well that are still distractions from the pain or the boredom or whatever someone is feeling inside, whether it is kind of the social media addiction, just the constant eating, or it cannot be as dangerous as drugs, say if you just have a lot of chocolate, but it's the same practice. You're just swapping one thing for another. The substance is variable, but the behavior is the same.
There's a great quote by Marianne Faithfull, who was, sort of, I think she was a model in the 60s, but she famously said, "Heroin saved my life." And to think about that, heroin, we all think is so destructive. Actually, it saved her life because she was going through such a difficult time. If she didn't have heroin to numb herself out, she would have killed herself. And for us to consider that addictions are just tools to cope with life is quite a confusing one. Yeah, societally approved coping mechanisms like work addiction or exercise addiction or orthorexia or things like that, things that start out as healthy and then become unhealthy when they become maladaptive and compulsive.
Yeah, and even alcohol, I guess it's so much part of the norm of our society, and yet it is actually, in many opinions, more toxic than a lot of drugs that are actually illegal. So it's just depends on what's socially acceptable or not, but that doesn't mean it's better for you by any stretch. So if we'll end on 3 things that you could do to optimize your health during this crazy lockdown period. I can guess your first one. What would your 3 things be?
Meditate, breath work is one. Schedule an appointment with a breath worker. The second one, I think, is nasal breathing, especially for times of when you might be worried about viruses. Nasal breathing, what it does is you have hairs in your nose and you have a mucosal lining, and that is like an air filter. That's your first line of defense against viruses, pathogens, and things like that. As well, nasal breathing, what it does is you have nitric oxide in your nose, and nitric oxide in vitro studies has been shown to kill viruses and flu and things like that. So just breathing through your nose can kill a lot of pathogens and things like that. So nasal breathing, especially when you're out, especially when you're exercising. And Patrick McEwen, he is the real go-to guy on nasal breathing for exercise and health. And he has a book called The Oxygen Advantage, which I would really recommend. And then I guess the third one would be turn your phone off and electrics when you are going to sleep, and sleep in an environment that you are able to regenerate successfully.
Brilliant. So meditate, breathe through the nose, and switch your phone off to optimize your health. And where can people find out more about you? And especially if they like to do some workshops with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I am at The Breath Geek on Instagram, _breath_geek, richardlblake.com, and also thebreathgeek.com. I am doing online one-to-one sessions, breath work. I'm also doing online Zoom group breath works as well. So if you want to have a one-to-one or join one of my groups, follow me on Instagram and reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to be joining you for one of those. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today. And there's so much more we could follow up on as well. But that was a great starting point on breath work. and EMF. So thank you.
Thank you.